is also for these proposals to succeed, shipping joint ventures between India and ASEAN on a much larger scale. And also smaller transshipment projects between our countries, especially the ASEAN countries which are closer to the Indian coastline. So an agreement on maritime transport between India and ASEAN, I believe, would cover these areas and should be seriously looked at. There is also a clear need to develop air links. We always talk about tourism awareness. It cannot happen unless all our major Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities are connected by direct flights, for instance, with all the ASEAN countries. That's not the case at the moment. So if you have Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and now Indonesia, that's fine, but you have other countries as well. So we want to increase our linkages in tourism and in trade and in investments. Obviously, businessmen will not take the trouble to hop across two countries and get into one of the ASEAN countries and then try and do business over there. It's inconvenient. So one must look at that as soon as possible. Some arrangements have been put into place, like that with Brunei. That's not fructified, and we must look into the reasons why that has not happened. Finally, we have done, as far as India is concerned, I believe we've done our part on connectivity with ASEAN in culture to culture and people to people contacts, and also cultural cooperation, because there's been a lot of emphasis on exchange of diplomats, youth, media and intellectuals, scholarship programs, etc. with ASEAN countries. Of course, this will continue because we need to align ourselves with the ASEAN integration plan of 2025, but at the same time also enhance our cooperation in areas like food and agriculture, in education, clean and renewable energy, in tourism, in health, in SME development, which is a major sector of common to us, and poverty elimination. And then, of course, institutional linkages, which was referred to exist. 30 of such linkages have been already put into place. But what has succeeded is the centers of excellence, for example, in English language, in IT and software development between India and ASEAN. These have all been utilized and have been huge success. These need to be ramped up. And also the additional $50 million which was announced to the ASEAN India Fund by our Prime Minister, that will be useful in conducting these activities. As far as big ticket items are concerned, I believe you'll require additional funding. Also, disaster management and humanitarian affairs assistance has been important, including risk reduction. This needs to be sustained between India and ASEAN. There is need to ramp up cooperation under the ASEAN India Green Fund for the implementation of activities, because things like climate change, adaptation, India has a lot to contribute to some ASEAN countries in this respect. We also have increased the corpus of the ASEAN India Science and Technology Development Fund. So that's gone up from $1 million to $5 million in 2016. And that is basically meant to support collaborative R&D and technology development programs between India and ASEAN. So what has happened there is that it's been given over to corporate bodies to run. I believe there should be diversification of that fund. It should also be given over in part to governmental institutions, at least 3 or 4 of them, so that it's diversified in its implementation. More and more people should know about it. And I feel it's been underutilized, and it should be better utilized in that context. Cyber security was mentioned. It's very important because industrial espionage and countering cyber attacks on utilities and commercial establishments is something that we share with ASEAN. And we ourselves have proposed an innovation platform and building of digital connectivity with ASEAN. And both these, I believe, India should push forward in the future. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil, for such a comprehensive and speedy presentation of views on a host of subjects. You were India's ambassador in Thailand and then a top policy maker here in Delhi. And so it sounds very convincing, and it is. when you put across the rationale behind some of the decisions and approaches that the government of India adopted. And this is where a bit of a dialogue of the deaf between India and ASEAN emerges, because we just heard how the speaker talked about complete lack of progress on $1 billion investment fund that India offered 3 years back. We don't hear any response whatsoever from ASEAN. When Anil talks about the special project fund of $77 million for CLMB, we don't hear a word about it. Earlier in the previous session, it was pointed out that the agreement on investment and services, which has been signed, India and ASEAN agreement, but it is held up. I can understand Mr. Vermonte will say it's not my concern, I am a strategic guy, I do not know anything about economics. But the fact is that India and ASEAN will have to learn to talk to each other rather than talking at each other. Unless we become more frank and more candid, some of these things are just left high in the air, and that obviously then gives a chance to critics of India-ASEAN partnership to point out that nothing is happening. But be that as it may, my only point on which perhaps a debate can be initiated, Anil, is the very first line that you uttered as you started your presentation, and you said, Asian century has arrived. Now, is this the Asian century that is arriving, or is it the Chinese century, or is it the China-dominated or China-centric century that is arriving that we are mistaking to be Asian century? Indonesian view you just heard when our friend said that actually China definitely is a potentially belligerent country, but that is something we will again leave it for a later time. I'm very happy now to request my good old friend, Professor Sutipan Chirathivat, to address you.
Thanks, my respect, Chair, Ambassador Bhatia. Thanks, ASEAN India Center, or RS in particular, Pabia, for the kind invitation. And I think we had a very full day and very day that we had made important exchange to celebrate at the same time 25th ASEAN India, that's relation and partnership. I'm very pleased and privileged to add, perhaps as last speaker, which is not that easy task. That's among the old friends and both Ambassador Rajanath and Ambassador also the Anil Wadhwa, who just returned from Bangkok, and add up to the last minute, and including this session, Ambassador from Vietnam who left, and Dr. Philip, the young colleague. I admire the young generation that we have, the continuation of this kind of dialogue. So this session deals exactly with ASEAN, India, and how we work, and we will be working in an integrated Asia. Of course, Asia, we're talking at whether Asia lead the world or Asia century, but Asia is integrating, continue to be integrated with the world as much as we're working among ourselves, like the way ASEAN India partnership is demonstrating. So it's very difficult to add up, but I will just be very selective. Listen to what I heard since this morning, and particularly what particularly pertinent issue to this session. I would like to offer my own reflection to it, and of course, as already discussed very much, that luckily, for instance, I think it's for ASEAN integration is not like post EU, post Brexit EU. That's and India is not from America, but I think it's our integration is less threatening. I mean, an economic integration, but although we also have the political one still matters. That we're talking about. The way we've not been able to survive South China Sea. We have Rohingya humanitarian crisis in Myanmar, and we also have quite environmental concern that we have to manage. The best regime. Not talking about it. That's the right of the sea. That's we impact the way we are moving to the future. And it doesn't mean that all this we can escape this very increasing uncertain world. I think it's very important that we need to advocate that's the global issues. In particular, that's concern economic. We're talking about the multilateralism not working well, but we have global environment, global the SDG. That is there and it's still important. And we need to also neither of us manage well, but be in the global context. But we are facing with this as well the global weak architecture and institution that supporting us to moving ahead. So I think we need to continue to improve the process, and our participation is still key to improve and build our future. I'm not going to go in that developed world is still more divided than ever, while developing world like us should work more together to find our proper role in a global context. Next, I think is despite all this, the next few years, at least of growth and dynamism seem to be all right, even remarkable for India. I look at the newspaper yesterday, still growth forecast over 7%. And some ASEAN country, you're right to mention about CL, we at least, Myanmar, I hope also, despite that crisis. So we carry on the story of economic and social dynamism, the rise of middle class. By the time we will celebrate third decade of strategic partnership, I think the next 5 years is still a good time that we will make sure that we work things out that will support this remarkable growth and the rise of Asia, middle income and the challenges. And from the local to regional and global. Local, like ASEAN try to make sure about it must be sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and involving the large part of the rural, the population, the poor, the business would be the MSME, that's the civil society, the population, this is a population at large. And regional must be broadened and deepened and substantiate, involving multi-stakeholders from officials, entrepreneurs, workers, improving further our ways to communicate and network with people. ASEAN talking about the people center, community, people involvement, very important in this regional integration, and from the young, we talk about the young, they're eager to learn and gain knowledge. And the global also need to improve. We must work to overall process, as said earlier. Things that we talking less about this meeting, but I think as it will impact us in a big way about the digital transformation technology is starting to impact more than ever. And in fact, the ASEAN latest summit in Manila has taken seriously this issue and decide tour India, which also have the strong point about this area in services, which can be very much strengthened with each other. I think there's at least 3 points among other issues we could address. One is about we're talking about technology disruption for business as much as the job and adaptation. I think very important. Because we try to address on this, talking a lot about the job, but I think the whole value chain that we're talking, right, this is going to impact in a big way. We cannot expect perhaps part of it. We talk about value chain, that's the so-called the lower cost going to the lower pay country. But the scenario is not always be that way. I mean, that's if the upcoming AI and robotics